Well, even the best preparations can't keep wildfires at bay when Oklahoma turns to a crispy brown. But what can help is what we do around our homes. Earlier, I visited with State Forester George Geissler about Oklahoma's Firewise program. Well, George, it seems as if the past couple of years have been particularly difficult for firefighters, especially with wildland fires.
Well, they have. I mean, 2011 and 2012 are 2 years that are really going to go down in at least Oklahoma Forestry's memory. In 2011, we were in 41 counties, which for us, we typically serve about 15 counties on the eastern side. Having to travel to 41 kept our crews busy all the way to Beckham County. In 2012, we were in 42 counties. The first year, we were at about 135 to 150,000 acres burned. This past season, which was 2012, we're around 186,000 acres, almost 190,000 acres. So we had a lot of firefighters that were on the road for weeks at a time and driving a lot of mileage. And I know that our own crews were just a small representation of what we had with all the rural fire departments and metro fire departments across the state.
What can a homeowner do to kind of decrease the danger of wildfire?
Well, within the Firewise program, there's a lot of things that a homeowner can do, but it really boils down to personal responsibility. Of Oklahoma being a fire ecology, in other words, wildfire is going to be here. We have to prepare ourselves, our property, and our lands for that fire that will inevitably happen. It can be simple things. And if you're living in a home where you have a yard, it's making sure your bushes are trimmed and that they're of the right type. It could be mowing your grass and keeping it low. If you look at what your house has, anything that is going to catch an ember, and it's not the flaming front that is going to get your house, it will be the small blowing embers. So your E-vents being properly screened, or the weep holes in the foundation of a brick home, or even where two sections of roofs mesh together, there might be a tight seam and it would collect embers. Those are the things that are going to inevitably cause a house to ignite. And then with the landscaping, we want to be able to make sure that our firefighters can work safely, because we will not send fire crews in to an area where we know they won't be able to get back out. So knowing that the drive or the road going to your home is wide enough, that the limbs that are overhanging that road are tall enough, and that there's a good place for us to turn around when we get there. Those are some of the basics that can be there, just so that a firefighter can get in and get out if the situation arises.
Is there a rule of thumb on how far back you need to have trees and maybe foliage from a home?
Well, we work in zones, and the first 30 feet away from your home, you don't ever have to go without a shrub or ever have to go without a tree. But the idea is to make sure that that area is as fire resistant as possible. There are types of shrubs that, due to their normal high moisture content, are more resistant to fire. You wouldn't want to put something that has volatile oils like the creeping juniper or something like that along your home. If you go out about 30 feet and you start limbing up your trees, so just get clearance. It's the fire that creeps along the ground, that's not going to do anything. But when it gets up into the crowns of the trees or in the actual foliage of a bush, that's getting into what we in firefighting term ladder fuels, which will bring the fire off the ground up into the crowns of the bushes and trees and actually increase the intensity and the amount of embers that are blowing. So by pruning your shrubs up about 6 feet or so, and then putting spacing between the trees just so that the crowns are not touching each other. Maybe give 4 or 5 feet of clearance. And then just continuing out from that 30 feet to 100 feet, continuing to do that type of work to where you do have an area around your home that's been treated. That's probably a 100-foot diameter circle around the structure.
Doing this work, can it help with your home insurance?
Well, becoming Firewise is something that a lot of insurance companies are looking at. If you look out west, there are insurance companies today that go out and inspect homes to make certain that they are Firewise. Firewise is the brand name, if you want to call it, but defensible. And so they will look for what I described as the pruning and the types of plants that you have, but they'll even be looking at the structure of your home for the screening or for its design, and they'll also be looking to see if you clean out your rain gutters and make sure that there's no leaves and shrubs. There have been cases where if it was deemed not to be defensible, the insurance premiums have gone up. Or in some of the most severe cases, homeowners are dropped from insurance because their home is deemed not defensible.
Now, I know you deal mostly in rural areas, but as, what did you call it, the urban wildland interface, but as we see people moving outwards, do those tend to be more at risk than maybe some traditional agricultural places? Yes, if you look at around major communities where homeowners are moving into these wildland urban interface areas, they're typically living on 1 to 20 acres. They are not agricultural producers. In other words, they're not out there typically grazing the land or growing crops. And what happens is that the lands that are typically grazed or in crops, they're much more resistant to wildland fire. So these landowners that are moving in, they don't have that agricultural background, and so they're kind of at a loss as to how to maintain this now large yard that they have. And at times those become overgrown, or the lands, the trees and vegetation that's on it are not as healthy, so the trees are more susceptible to ice damage, insects, disease, and so you have much more fuel that is eventually falling onto the ground and made available in the case of a wildfire. Could our recent rains, could they be a bit of a double-edged sword in terms of fuel load? Yes, they are. You know, and it's hard to think about it because we all are so happy when that green up occurred. I mean, when the first rain started happening at the end of our fire season last year, no one was happier than our firefighters. But what we've had is an increase of growth now. We get a flush of the fine fuels, which are the grasses. Now, if we do go into a dry period, those fuels will dry out, which will be made available for ignition. And it's the little fine stuff that actually catches first. So having enough of that will actually increase the fire danger. You know, we typically used to say that if we hit the spring time when it would green up, our fire season would just drop off. And while this year we've actually gotten the rains, the past 2 years we've been in a kind of a continuous fire season. And the only thing that did stop it were the small showers that would come in, but we never were breaking that drought cycle that we really needed, because at one point during the summer of 2012, the average tree that was lying on the ground out there was actually drier than what most people burn as firewood in their fireplace. And so once a fire got into that type of fuel, it would just be so difficult to put out. But now with these recent rains, what we're seeing is we're not getting the ignitions to even get it to that large fuel, because if you think about it, it grows from the smaller to the gradually larger stuff as heat builds up. And so without the finer fuels that are dry, we're not getting the ignition, so we're not having the fires. So we're happy. Good. Well, certainly an important subject, and George, I certainly appreciate you being here. No problem. Thank you. All right. Now, if you'd like to learn more about the Firewise program, we do have a link to that entire website on our website at okhorizon.com.